Hi, I'm Gail Banack.
And I'm Ilana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the She Means Business podcast. Our guest today is Isabelle Landreville, owner and chief insight seeker at Sylvestre Co. She brings over 2 decades of experience in qualitative research. She was recently named one of the top 50 women leaders of Montreal for 2024. Isabelle brings a unique bilingual, bicultural approach to understanding customers. Her international experience includes leading research studies across Europe and North America. And she's the host of the Insightful Inspiration podcast, where she explores how brands can better connect with their audiences through meaningful insights and authentic understanding. I have personally worked with Isabelle for years and have spent so much time with her and learning from her and learning with her. She is truly insightful. She can see through bullshit like no one I've ever seen before. And quite frankly, she's a ton of fun. We are so happy to have you on the show today. Isabelle, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And fun, yes, that's usually how we roll.
Fun. We have so much fun together. Okay, let's get right into it. As we often do, we want to learn more about you. So can you please share with us your background and your professional journey that led you here?
So I think it all started, and everybody kind of falls into insights for some reason. I didn't quite fall into insights. So I have a very kind of probably traditional career path, so I'm from Ottawa, which sort of explains the biculturalism and sort of bilingualism. I have a mother tongue, a father tongue. I was raised in like the two solitudes. If you know Canada, you very much know, Quebec, French, Catholic, Protestant, English, sort of Ontario. So smack in the middle, raised by both or within both. And I was at Ottawa U, and my last semester, I had the same teacher or same professor in every single class I had left.
What?
So I was in 4th year. I did an honors bachelor. And I was in 4th year, and my 3 classes were marketing classes. And they were all with this professor no one really knew. He was an invited professor from Paris. And I kept thinking, oh my, he better be good.
Yeah, really.
And he was so good. And I was a TA back there. So I have a minors in operations management because I do math really well and linear algebra really well. So I used to teach that. And so I was a TA, and he was that professor, and I would wish that for everybody. He was that professor that was so passionate about what he did and how he did it that he just transmitted that passion, and you could not be passionate about what this guy was passionate about after the 3-hour class, after the first class. And because I was a TA, he kind of looped me in, and I started doing research for him. And he had a consultancy kind of aspect to his job and whatnot. And so whenever I started doing research with him, we had a part of the research that helped him publish, so I'm published, so that's kind of normal. But then there was also, because it was through this consultancy firm, we were also doing kind of a PowerPoint or research report and presenting to the business world. So there was a really sort of real business side of it, not just ivory tower academic kind of looking at and sort of, witnessing the world. It was very much actionable on the side too. So he hooked me in. And then after that, I taught with him. He taught a class from Paris. I did in my last semester, I taught in Ottawa. And then that was it. He taught me how to moderate. He taught me how to do participant observation, ethnography, and all that jazz. And then when my last semester came in, and he said, I think I was like a month away from graduating. And he said, so do you have a job lined up? And I'm like, no, do I need a job? What? And so my first job was in consultancy, in market research in Paris.
Wow.
And
that's glamorous.
Yeah,
Emily in Paris, Isabelle in Paris.
No, the fashion was better, I would say. Less stereotypical. But yeah, so I moved to Paris after my bachelor's degree. And then amongst all of that, I actually enrolled in the MSc over there and then ended up doing a lot of ethnographic research across Europe and I went to Russia. Like, it was just amazing. Wow. And then I came back to Canada for, I think, 2 reasons. I think in this podcast, I think it's important to say, probably because we're 3 women and strong women, because I do think there's more opportunities in Canada for women. Mm-hmm. The class ceiling is probably, you hit it probably later, and it's probably not as thick, to be quite honest.
Interesting.
So I think there's a bit of that. At one point, I came to that conclusion quite early on in my career. So there was that. And also because before I left, I had met this boy.
There's always a boy.
No, but yeah, so there was a boy. And I think after graduating, I had probably in hindsight, the maturity, the outlook on life. I don't know how I played chess, but the vision to say, you know what, I don't want to play house with you. I think I need to be or know who I'm going to be. I don't want to become who I'm supposed to be, like in conjunction with you. And so he did his own thing. He went on tour as a musician on a record.
Oh, wow.
He had fun. I had fun. And then 4.5 years passed, and we said, okay, so what are we doing? There was kind of at one point, okay, long distance, what are we doing? And then we picked a city, and then there was a few contender, and we said, oh, how about we do Montreal? It's close enough to New York, close enough to Toronto, kind of close enough to our family and our, like, his mom and stuff. And they said, how about we do Montreal? So he moved to Montreal before I did. And then I made a point of getting my own apartment when I came in. I had no job. I had nothing. So I had to start from scratch. I had to start from scratch when I came back, which was quite humbling because I ended up being a barista at Starbucks for a while because I was in school. So it wasn't like easy to make friends and stuff. But in that sense, I had no network. No one knew what my graduate program was in because the program didn't exist back then here in Canada. No one knew who my school was. So I started from scratch, and qualitative research wasn't what it is today. And I was too young to be credible. To be a good qualitative researcher back in the day was to have a huge Rolodex and be a marketer that ended up being an independent person or something of the likes. And so I started saying I was 32, well beyond the point. And when I hit 32, the running joke was that I stayed 32 for the same amount of years. And I sort of was ahead of my time. So I was 32 for about 9 years there.
Wow.
To be quite honest. And then, so I ended up joining meeting with Julie Sylvestre, hence Sylvestre Co. It was, so her father is the founder, founded the company in 1972. She was a huge success and actually took over the business from him. So Julie hired me. I think we worked together for about 4.5 years as an employee. Then I went on mat leave, came back a business partner for about 4.5 years. And then I've owned the business for 10 years now, fully on my own. Wow. So that's basically, so I've only done qualitative research, and I have a pretty kind of every 5 years, there's a thing, there's kind of, very much a Nintendo generation kind of thing.
I have just a quick clarifying question. What is define qualitative research? Like, what does that mean?
Good question. I think my mother-in-law still doesn't quite fully understand that. And she's very smart and awesome. But so qualitative research is basically, we study people using people. So we're not about census. We're not about numbers. We're not about stats. We're about, I think I have a good friend who summarizes what I do as you make friends for a living and you get into the mushy sort of realness of people and what makes them tick, either positively or negatively. I think it's where the insights truly are. And you usually I come into your life, usually if you're a business who wants to really, really get to know and empathize with their consumer and do something about it so that it's really, truly human-centric.
I love that. I've also defined it as the why. So you can ask as many questions of like, how many of these do you buy and what do you do on a Sunday and where do you go to get this? But like, if you really want to answer why does somebody do something or not do something? Mm-hmm. And likely in order to get them to do something or not do something, then that's when qual research gets in.
You can definitely tell when you're with two people who have a passion for research and the customer, how you can get really into that.
We will debate the definition of qualitative research.
I can totally tell.
Yeah. I usually say I don't do numbers. I do people. Yeah. I do dollars, though. I do own a company. So I do accounting, but I don't do stats. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's just interesting because, you know, it's almost like we've come full circle because there's so much now focus on the customer and really understanding the why, right? You went through a period, or at least I felt like in the beginning of my career, it was all about like data and like surveys and now it, you know, everybody in, at least in retail, but generally in industry is just trying to figure out exactly what you said, Gail, the why of like, why are customers acting the way they are? What is going to get them to be loyal? What is going to get them to kind of, for us to be able to acquire them and have them stay in their ecosystem? So it's a very interesting and timely place to be.
One of the chill moments that I remember having, and it was with you, Isabelle, when we worked together at a past life, and we were doing a big values study on Canadians. And through the work that you did, we had identified, I don't remember, like 6 or 7 groups of people that basically suggested that Canadians fall into one of these 7 groups in terms of what actually drove them from a value standpoint. And then if you recall, we then created a test to then be able to test people to then determine where they are so that we could then recruit them for focus groups and talk to each group specifically so that we knew who we were talking to. And I remember taking the test and I identified myself as one of those groups. And then I remember your presentation walking us through each one of the groups. And you did such a great job of describing each one of these groups. And the one of the groups that I was in, the one that I identified with, you gave each one of the groups kind of a saying, like if this type of person had a saying, this is what it would be. And you wrote on the one that was mine, life is a journey. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget, I got chills. I went home that day and I found a journal that I had, and the cover of it said, life is a journey. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa, that is crazy. And that I see as like, it's really good qual. If you can get to know a person that deeply that you can, and it's obviously it's not just asking the questions, it's then having the ability to then wrap it up and explain it and all of that, and then apply it and be able to leverage it for business. If you can do that, that is really cool. Like no survey, in the world or big data can get you there.
Yeah. And that's an insight. I think is being in the presence of an insight.
Yeah.
Is that feeling that you just described. There's like, oh my God, you read my soul. There's something. That's an insight. It feels really simple, but there's hours of work behind it. And if it's that simple, it's true. An insight is not a key learning. It's not a key takeaway. An insight is just that. It's like, it's, yeah.
I want to just turn a little bit to your career because it's been something that's interesting. Like many or most, I would say, of the people that we've had on the show have had very kind of windy careers. And you are someone who's unique a little bit in this day and age because you have really pursued a passion for over a series of many years. You've bought in, so you're kind of in. And I'm just curious, like, tell us a little bit about that mindset of this is it. This is what I want to do. This is where I've found my passion. How did that come to be? Or, I mean, you told us a little bit about how it came to be, but how do you feel about it? How does it look like looking back to see how you got here?
I think it's easy if you fully understand what being a qualitative researcher truly is. I think being a qualitative researcher is what I used to say back in the day was it's a lifestyle. Because you plan research in theory, just big picture, you plan research between 9 to 5, and then you do research 5 to 9. It has a real impact on your life. And to be a good moderator, to be a good researcher, you have to be fully present. You have to actively listen. The job in itself, my art, my science, my passion, my work it is not self-serving. I am not fulfilling my curiosity. I am not there to ask my own questions. It is never about me. It's about the participant and about the client. I am merely a conduit. So if you factor all of that together, you kind of say, okay, well, if I want to actually be able to do this for a long time, I have to figure out how to make it happen, because you can't be moderating all the time. You do have to self-preserve. Like after COVID, there was a thing in our industry where there was empathy fatigue. Like empathy fatigue can be a thing with moderators. So the minute you understand that, and back in the day, like I used to live with families. Like how can you raise your kids if you're living with another family for days and weeks at a time? So it can be all consuming. So I think that if you want to do this, you have to quickly understand what you need to do as a person. Like you get real with yourself in the sense that how can I be able to do this and be that generous without leaving my shirt, without basically giving everything I have and having nothing left for me? Because you need patience, you need open-mindedness, you can't react, you can't create a bias, you can't judge the people, and I meet a whole bunch of different people, and all of them are fabulous. And I give the benefit of the doubt to everyone all the time, at fault probably. And I'm generous with my time at a fault. So you do have to be true to yourself. You do have to set boundaries. And then if you want to really do it, you have to find a way to be able to have a life and a lifestyle. And so very, very early on, I figured out what my strengths were, what was really important to me, what was not so important to me. And then I got real. So I guess I matured and I picked my friends and I picked what I wanted to do and what was important to my mental health, my physical health, my relationships very early on, probably 20 years earlier than most people. Because I mean, if I need to take the day off, because the day off for me is the evening, to attend someone's birthday party, which seems simple enough, I need to make sure that I'm showing up for the right people and I'm showing up in a way that reflects who I am and who I want to be in life. So it gets really interesting, really. Not everybody looks at it that way, but that's how I've navigated through my career and kind of built what I built and the way I sort of went about it.
I want to draw on something, and I don't know enough about it, so you're going to have to tell us a little bit about it, but you're not working weekends, or you wanting to be a mom and fold tiny pajamas. Talk about the discipline, or first talk about what you actually do. Talk about your routine, and then talk about how you created that for yourself.
So I think becoming a business owner said that I can manage a client in my sleep. I can set myself up for success and manage a client in my sleep. Like I will protect my team. I will go to bat. I will set myself up to exceed expectations all the time. I can manage a client. I hate having to ask permission to leave the office. I hate asking permission to go to Disney World because blah, blah, blah. I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want the micromanagement. I didn't want the micro things. I wanted to, if you know me, the one thing that gets me is free. I just want to feel free and I just want to be free, which comes with a lot of responsibility. One would say you're a business owner, you're not free, but I feel very free, not empowered, just free. And so I think that is part of the solution. The other part of the solution is that, so remember 2010. So 2010 is when the iPhone was launched. There was this thing called, research tech and online research, and could we do this? And I was like, can I moderate while breastfeeding? I'm like, can I do that? And because I had both hands on the wheel and the freedom I started exploring that question. I started what can I innovate? What can I do? I even kind of created a focus group facility in Second Life to moderate focus groups in Second Life. Like I've moderated focus groups in Second Life. Now we don't do that anymore, but that's how kind of interested I was to actually be able to do that. And also because I didn't want to do the entire job. I've never had an ego in that sense. And so I said, if I can then, what's really important that I do, that I want to do, which is get the client, sell the research, the discussion guide, moderate the report. However, do I really need to write the slides? However, do I really need to write the screener? So I started sort of building a team around me and then I started, Sylvestre was about people and it's still about people. But then I started shifting it because people said, oh, you own the business, your name's on the door. I'm like, no, and it's not supposed to. The name shifted from Sylvestre marketing to Sylvestre and Co. And that's when I joined. I'm in Co. In company, because I needed to be able to have a day off. I needed to be able to, what happens if I lose my voice? What happens if my kid gets hospitalized? I need to be able to be sick, which any moderator or qual researcher will know you cannot. So I think there's a lot of structure that I put in place. And then my husband said, can you not work weekends? And I made him a promise.
And so you don't work weekends. Does anyone at your company work weekends?
No.
So you've kind of drawn the line for, that's kind of a principle in terms of how you do things.
Yeah, I think all bets are off between Monday and Friday. Because we moderate and because it depends, and time zones. I mean, moderating in Vancouver, red eye fly back and blah, 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 and all of that. So I think there's a bit of that. So in theory, some people on my team work weekends because they are the number one parent, and it allows them to be at school at 2:40. Sure. And then, so they don't moderate during the week. They will do that. So the mission of Sylvestre Co is to enhance the quality of life of all stakeholders, from respondent or participants all the way to client and the team and our suppliers and our partners and all of that. So everybody, when we do the 360 degrees of eval, we're like, what's your definition of quality of life? Let's structure something around that.
So let me ask you, listening to you speak, you seem to know yourself really well. Mm-hmm. You seem to have been able to draw boundaries exceptionally well in terms of what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. You've talked a little bit about, your ability to build a team around you so you can achieve the outcomes that you've been very disciplined in doing. When has that not worked for you? When have you hit a setback or I can't imagine it's all been straight lines. So tell us about a time or two in your career where you've kind of sat there thinking, man, I didn't have that one, or that didn't feel good.
So where it falls off the rails is when everything happens at once. So there is such a thing as I need to make payroll. I have a team, right? It's not just me. And there's a structure because now we have huge clients and therefore we work with some banks. And so there's cybersecurity and there's like we're a big company. And so there is even if you're human scale, the system is and sort of pretty big. So there's that. And sometimes I do end up having to work for the business more so than on the business. And so that becomes really interesting, to say the least. So when working on the business is as demanding at some periods of either the business cycle or whatnot, and when everybody wants the same dates for a project. So when and they just want me and not someone else. I think so then I have to do two jobs, because I do have two jobs. I do have two jobs. They're just going to put it out there. I don't have one job. I have two jobs, business owner and, market researcher and quality. So when those two jobs are as demanding, I think that's where they're both kind of you could say, they're in the same bed kind of pulling at the duvet on either side. And there's a lot of tension there. So that gets hard in that sense. I think also it gets challenging. I'm in the people business. So when people start to falter or people don't honor their commitments, that's been really challenging. When they say they're going to do something like work ethics, I have a really strong work ethic and my system works if you kind of show up. I will always show up for you. But if you don't show up for me and don't give me a heads up, because if you give me a heads up, I'm super generous. I will save you. I will fold the blanket over in. But if you don't give me a heads up and I don't know, I have very little margin unless I work weekends. I always have the weekend margin. And so that becomes really, really difficult to manage. So if someone on my team doesn't pull through or doesn't have a strong work ethic, then it becomes a little bit problematic to be.
And what do you do in those situations where that tension is high?
So I think there's external resources, we have a network, and I think there's a lot of sort of what I've been always really good at saying, which is, what do you really need to do? And what do you not need to actually do? And who can you phone a friend type of thing? I do think that everybody's really honest with one another on my team. Whereas if I have time or more bandwidth that week because I'm at 70% or 80% capacity or 40% because something has moved, I raise my hand and I tell my team. the entire team is clear on what their strengths is. Everybody's clear on what their added value is, and we call them superpowers. So everybody has their own superpower. Everybody knows each other's superpower. It is your responsibility to fuel your superpower, to make sure it really is the butt. What's your superpower? I'm a strategic brain. Strategy.
I thought you were gonna say I don't work weekends, because that is a superpower.
But I mean, if professional development can happen weekends, reading up on something, discovering something, like going to an art museum just to open your mind to something else. I think that's still part of career development. That's still being a qualitative researcher is very much anchored in who you are and your values. It does change who you are as a person, and you do need to be a certain person to do it. Like, it does change you. And so I think all of that is also needed so that you can actually come and have the empathy you need to actually do your job. So I think it's on you to keep reading. It's on you to keep a pulse check on culture, on pop culture, on all of that, to make sure all these passions above and beyond yours. So I think it's just good and makes you better. But then if you screwed up, it's okay. If you can make up over the weekend. Or if you want to go skiing on a Wednesday, that's usually what I do. If there's a huge snowfall and I'm not moderating and I can get away, I'm usually driving to Tremblant and sneaking away and going sneaking. And then I might work on the Saturday morning to make up for it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So, Isabelle, you mentioned earlier that you were kind of ahead of your time age-wise, and were very wise very early on in terms of what you wanted, what you didn't want. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self? How would you advise her?
Yeah, I love that question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask. And I always ask it because I can't answer it for myself. So full transparency, you sent me a few, like you said, oh, we're going to talk about this. This is kind of where, and that question was kind of part of the potential questions. And I'm like, oh, I don't have an answer. And I was talking to my husband, and I strongly believe in not getting ahead of yourself. And so there is this notion of don't skip ahead. Like, just take what you can in that moment and do what you can. And so I hope that I'm better. Like, I think I'm better. I hope I am. I'll be very humble. I think I've come a long way. I hope I do. I'm not perfect. I still have ways to go. I will die with very much knowing my faults. I'm very far from perfect. But I think there's something about looking back. I would have some piece of advice, and I could tell myself a few things. But I think if I told myself these things, maybe I wouldn't be where I am today, and I don't want that for myself. So that's why I can't answer, and that's why I can't answer the question.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're a person who believes in the journey, and you believe that things happen for a reason, and you believe that you needed to go through whatever in order to get to where you are, then it's hard to take that away and by fear that you won't end up in the same spot. So I get it. I get it. Thank you so much. This has been so fun and so interesting. Like I said, I always learn so much from you, and it's such a pleasure to have you on. So thank you for joining and sharing your story.
You are so welcome. Anytime.
I learned a lot today.
Oh, good.
I did. So it was great. Okay. It was great to speak with you. Well, that was a very interesting and really insightful, I found. Well, first of all, it's in a topic that I don't know a lot about. So I really loved the way she talked about her journey to where she ended up, and something unique about being in a field, picking it and staying with it. We always comment on the windy, but there's something about the straight as well. Yeah. No, I found what she said about her flexibility very, very interesting, because it's always interesting to see that one person's flexibility is very different to another. So her interpretation of, I'm going to own my own business, I'm not going to work weekends, I don't have to ask for permission, I don't have to answer to anybody, is more important than working evenings. Right. So, and I think it very much resonates with me, because I've always said, most organizations will not tell you to stop working. They will take whatever you're willing to give. And so
You have to draw the line yourself and decide what you're willing and not willing to do. And for me, I don't mind working evenings sometimes, and I don't mind, working late. And sometimes I do some of my best work on a Friday evening. But it's just so interesting. And I think as I think of us as leaders, thinking about our teams and making sure you're talking to people on your team to understand, to help them understand and to understand yourself where they see the flexibility, what's important to them. Is it leaving at 4 to catch a gym class that, with their favorite, instructor, but then they're willing to work late, or the typical leaving early to pick up your kids so that they can work later, or, just so that they don't have to work weekends, or they don't mind, sitting on the couch on the weekend with the laptop, on lap and doing some work. I think it's a very personal choice, and we can't assume that we know what anybody's preference is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you hit on something very important in this scenario, which is it's really important for leader and person on team to have an arrangement that works for them. Yeah. And so I know in my career, it's ebbed and flowed so many times, right? When I started out my career, I'd be at work till 7:30 and I loved it, right? I'd hang out with the other people. We'd go for drinks. Yeah. I'd socialize during the day. It was really, really fluid for me. And then I had my kids and I was like religious. At 5 o'clock, I left the office because I was going to have dinner with my kids when I could. Yep. And so I left, but I always opened not always, but I had work to do. I would open my laptop at 8 after the kids went to bed and I'd work for a couple of hours. And now I find like I'm too tired at night. So I wake up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and if I can't get my work done by 5 or 5:30, then I will do it in the morning, but it works for me. And I've always been able to do that because I've always worked with the people I work with or work for to, have that kind of arrangement. And so I think as people are thinking about their boundaries and what works for them, knowing that, and I think one of the things Isabelle really illustrated in this conversation is she really knows herself. Like it is very clear from when she starts talking. She knows who she is. She knows what's important to her. She knows what her values are. And that is the first step in saying, then therefore I need this out of my working relationship to be able to balance for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that it does, if you do kind of take control of your hours, your work-life integration, or whatever you want to call it, is it does prevent burnout. Correct. Because you have defined what you are willing to do and not willing to do, and you work within the confines of that, whatever that is. And it can change. I think it's a great point that you made as well. Like, I think of myself, when I was younger, I would work into all hours of the night, and I loved it. I love nothing more than, I'm a night owl and I love working till 1 a.m. But it's not practical anymore. I can't do it. And so I think you, in order to prevent burnout, you can't just be work till you fall apart.
Correct.
I love that. All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.